Welcome into the PFF Podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson. It is our Mailbag edition. Sam, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Steve. How are you doing?
Great. We had our day brightened by our little care package that Lee sent us. Do you want to let the listeners in on exactly what we got?
Yeah, so I'm sitting at my desk this morning in the PFF office. Mark Mitchell, who is our controller, the office, I don't even know what that is as a title, but apparently it's a thing.
He does it well. Whatever he's controlling,
yes,
he is
walks
very
up to me with a box and says, "This is for the PFF Podcast Crew." So I said, "Okay, I guess that's me." Open this box to find 4 mugs with PFF logos and hashtag Team Steve written on them, all of them.
That's right.
And then a poster, a letter, a very nice letter written from Lee explaining what this gift care package was. And then a poster which was apparently all done in MS Paint, which is masterful, really. Which basically ranked the PFF hosts, you, me, and Mike, in various categories. Each one of us got our own little logo, our own little silhouette, and a bar chart ranking our percentage, our PFF grade in various different categories. It's really a beautiful piece of work. We're going to have to put it up in the podcast closet. I do, however, think it was a touch inaccurate in places. I think we're going to need to throw it to our listeners to get some more accurate readings on some of these charts.
Yeah, I disagree with some of the grades for sure. I mean, look, it's weird being on the other side of this thing. I can understand why offensive linemen hate us. You know, I don't love being graded by Lee, who doesn't know the play call. But, you know, I do appreciate the effort that he puts into it. My fastball's underrated. I think he got us in stature. My beard's underrated. But, look, we've got time to grow and improve and get some other listeners involved in this thing.
Well, either your fastball is underrated or mine was dramatically overrated. Either way, I think we're a little bit too close in that particular stat.
We are a little too close. We'll rectify this whole thing. The mugs were beautiful. Lee's hashtag Team Steve all the way. So I don't really want to complain about his work. He is listener of the year right now, I would say.
Well, he's also offered to redo the chart with the correct values once we get it all done.
That's fantastic. Yes, we'll have to make this into a little game. We'll send out. Essentially, I think the fans need videos and or pictures so that they could properly judge fastballs and coverage grade and beard and stature and all that stuff. So we'll have to get on that and get the people involved here.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, let's get to the mailbag. You guys hooked us up on Twitter with a bunch of questions, so we appreciate that. Don't forget, if you are trying to get in touch with us through email, it is podcasts@profootballfocus.com. Or if you're looking to get in on some sponsorship when it comes to the PFF Awards, you can also contact us at that email and get your company involved and sponsor I think we're looking at 7 to 9 awards that would have your company's name on it. So don't forget, if you have that opportunity, to email us. All right, starting with Andrew. Analytically speaking, what are some stats that people blame players for that vary because of randomness rather than player performance? Some that might fit into that category are interceptions, red zone touchdown percentage, sacks, etc. Sam, what do you have there as far as these stats go that shouldn't always be directly attributed to the player?
I don't know about the randomness part, but this is basically why PFF exists and why we grade players. Is because every statistic can be warped by something else. There's no number out there that is just one guy at work. And it's across the board. Obviously, interceptions are the most obvious example. You know, how many of these interceptions were a quarterback's fault and how many were off the hands of his receivers, or, you know, whatever. Various different things can influence interceptions. And the same thing on the other side of the ball. How many times did a guy make a great play in coverage, or how many times was the quarterback hit as he threw and a defender just happened to be under it as it came down? So interceptions are obviously a big one, but almost any number you can come up with, there's another factor at work as opposed to just the one number you're trying to or the one facet you're trying to prove. So, you know, yards before contact, say, is a big metric these days for offensive lines. And typically the higher yards before contact you get means your offensive line is generating movement at the point of attack and opening holes up for the running back. But there are going to be plays where a running back is just able to break contain, make a good move in the backfield, get to the edge and turn a nothing play into a 70-yard gain, all without contact, and that offensive line stats get inflated. So really across the board, almost any number you can think of, there's at least some other factor weighing in on it, which is why we always try and bring the context of the grading to these stats as well. And it's only when you have a bunch of different numbers all acting together to give you the same story that you can start to build the full picture of what it is you're trying to look at.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it, Sam. I would even just throw touchdowns in there, and again, trying to add the context that we bring to the table. A couple examples in recent weeks. I made the point a couple weeks ago. Carson Wentz makes this beautiful pass over the middle. I forget who it was, but he landed almost directly on the goal line when he caught the ball, and it went under review, and they ended up calling it a touchdown. And then this Monday night, Tom Brady makes one good pass in that entire game when he struggled, and Danny Amendola lands almost on the goal line, and he ended up about an inch short. And those were just two plays where the throw was exactly the same. Wentz made a nice throw. Brady made a nice throw. One of them was a touchdown. One of them was not. And you know how much just the touchdown number can skew your perception of a guy's performance. It does not change the throw one bit. Just one guy kind of landed an inch closer to the end zone than the next guy, and the Patriots ended up running the ball in, whereas Wentz got the touchdown. There are examples like that all the time. Of course, your screen passes for touchdowns and other passes that are very much receiver-driven, but the quarterback gets the stat. So I think that's just another obvious one. I would also say sacks for offensive linemen need a ton of context. That's the one where we're very good at grading the block, not the result. So if you make what we would consider a -1 block, which is essentially losing or whiffing on a block within 2 to 2.5 seconds, something like that in general. The difference between that particular play becoming a sack, hit, or a hurry is very much on the quarterback, the scheme, other pass rushers, different things are involved there. So that's one where the grade will be better than the stat there.
Yeah, sacks are a big one generally on both sides, not just the offensive line giving it up, but the guys generating the sacks. What kind of sack was it? Did the guy have to beat a guy quickly to make the play? Did he just happen to be standing there when the quarterback got flushed to him by somebody else's pressure? And even just going beyond sacks, one of the things we like to say is that looking at total pressure is a much better way of measuring pass rush than sacks, and it is, but the same problem exists there. So, you will get either a sack, hit, or a hurry if you record pressure as a defender, but each one of those can be a wide spectrum of plays. You can get pressure after 4 seconds, slowly working your way to the quarterback and ultimately moving him off his spot. Or you can get pressure because you immediately beat the right tackle and you're in the guy's face in like 1.5 seconds. They're the same stat on the stat sheet. And, broadly speaking, over an extended period of time, if you get a lot of pressures, you're doing something right. But those can be completely different plays where, again, you need the context of exactly what happened.
Yep. So just to wrap it all up, we always like to say the grades will give you the context for those stats, right? The grades will factor in the quality of the play, the speed of the play, how dominant a play was, and the stats will add a it's just different levels of context, I should say, that the grade and the stats will provide.
And all of these things are why a lot of times you look and the PFF grade is completely different to stats, even advanced stats. You look at these numbers, you say, well, your grades must be wrong because these stats say something else. And it's because of all these different ways that the statistics can be manipulated or don't quite tell the full story, that sometimes all those things can work in the same direction and the grade is completely different because it's factoring in what actually happened as opposed to the statistic that resulted in.
Exactly. Very good question, Andrew. And we like questions like that. I think those are questions that kind of shine a little bit of light on what we're trying to do at PFF. Let us explain a little bit more of the grades and the stats and the way we're trying to add context to the game. So good stuff there. Drew has a question which brings a little bit more insight into PFF grading. He says, how does PFF grade a play where, say, the quarterback makes a good throw to the underneath receiver for a solid 10-yard gain, but there was a receiver wide open that he missed down the field? The easy, simple answer to this, Sam, besides the fact that we don't truly know the reads and where the quarterback's supposed to go with the ball and trying to guess where that is, though, the more you talk to Zach, he does actually know. So in theory, we don't know, but we do know where a guy's supposed to go with the ball because schemes aren't that complicated if you know what you're looking for. The easy answer though is you left a bigger grade on the table for for a smaller grade. I think that's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, this is, I think, a really good way of illustrating why the grading works versus some other things. Is people will criticize you and say, well, you gave this guy a positive grade for this play, whereas a coach would sit this guy down and say, you missed this bigger play. That's a bad play. It's a bad read. But ultimately, it isn't, because he's still making a positive play. He's still making a positive gain, a positive outcome for the offense on that play. He just left something bigger on the table. And the key thing there is that the guy that gets those bigger plays, the guy that is making those bigger plays and making that coach happy, is going to get a better grade than the guy who doesn't.
Right.
So,
it'll show up in the grading
exactly.
over time.
So we're not directly on each individual play factoring that in and saying, well, look, that's a missed opportunity there. That's a negative. But the way the grading scale works, it is taken into account, because the guy that isn't passing up that play is going to have those higher plays.
I do have a story for that, Sam. I have a story.
Oh, really? Is it baseball related?
It's non-baseball related, so I'm a little out of my element here, but it's an Elite 11 story. We did go to Elite 11. I went there physically one year.
What's Elite 11, Steve? Some people don't know.
Oh, Elite 11. That's the yearly high school event that takes all of the best high school quarterbacks from around the country and tries to whittle them down to 18, I believe it is. They send them out to an event where they all compete and whittles them down to a top 11. It's called Elite 11. It's been around forever. Trent Dilfer took over a few years back, and they do some really good stuff there. So we did the grading for their 7-on-7 games for 2 straight years, and I was there physically for 1 year. It was the year that Sam Darnold was there, Josh Rosen was there, Brandon Wimbush from Notre Dame. So all these guys that are college quarterbacks right now. And this was actually a Josh Rosen play that Dilfer was questioning, and he said, why did you give him a 0 on this play? Because he checked down way too early, and he missed the corner route against cover 2, and it's just a bad misread. How do you not grade that negatively? And I said, basically, it's a 0 play. He made an expected throw. It was the wrong read, but he did leave that bigger grade on the table. I did give almost that same exact explanation that we just went through. So over time, the right reads will get you the higher grade. Whereas, sometimes just, making the misread and taking what looks like an expected throw, you've left something on the table. So I think it does show up in the grading over time, Sam.
Yep.
And Trent accepted that explanation. Trent was all for it.
Well, he's a smart man.
He said, good job, guys. All right, next one. Hey, guys, generic question. Which is a more effective coverage scheme league-wide in 2017? Is it man or zone? I'm aware that they function differently, but I've always been curious. He actually puts man into the proper buckets that we would use. Man is cover 0, 1, or 2. Zone is cover 3, 4, or 6. Quick explanation on that. The 3 buckets we will call man coverage. Cover 0, that's essentially you're blitzing everybody, and it's 5-on-5 man coverage. No safety help. That's cover 0. Cover 1 is man coverage across the board with 1 extra defender, or 2 extra defenders, potentially. 1 deep, 1 shallow. You could do various things with them. And then cover 2 man, where you usually keep 2 safeties back, and you'll have 5-on-5 man across the board with all eligible receivers. We're going to call those man for the sake of this discussion. And then everything else in the cover 3 family, cover 3, even though a lot of times it ends up as matchup zone, we're just going to throw it into the zone bucket for this explanation. Cover 4, cover 6 are just variations essentially of the cover zone 2 that Tampa Bay made famous, without getting into too many of the details. So we have some man versus zone numbers, Sam. I had a theory going into this question. Do you want me to give the theory first? And then
let's give your theory, and then we'll look at the numbers.
Okay, my theory in general on this is that against man coverage, it's a little bit more difficult to complete passes. You're talking about tighter windows, and usually don't have a ton of separation against man coverage unless guys get absolutely whooped. So I'm thinking it's difficult to complete passes. It does challenge the offense, but you're not going to create as many turnovers against man coverage. Zone, you have, in general, your eyes are on the quarterback. You have more defenders in the area to catch tip passes, and quarterbacks can misread zone coverage a little bit more, so they're going to put the ball in harm's way. So that's my general synopsis. Man, more difficult to complete passes, but zone, you're going to complete a higher percentage of passes, but also have more turnovers.
Yeah, and the numbers pretty much back you up there. It is a little bit easier to complete passes against zone coverage, and teams have been a little bit more productive in doing so. So general numbers against zone coverage, yards per attempt is higher. It's 7.6 versus 6.8. Passer rating is higher, but not much. It's 87.6 as a league average against zone, 82.7 as a league average against man. The average depth of target, though, is up against man. Deep pass percentage is up against man. Big time throw percentage is up against man. Typically, you're getting those bigger plays in those man coverage situations because of those busts. You know, you're able to exploit a bust and it goes for a huge gain. So, yeah, pretty much dead on. And you're getting a higher turnover-worthy throw percentage against zone. So bigger plays come against man. You get fewer of them. There's more of it's easier generally to complete passes against zone, but you are weighing that up against the risk of the turnovers because defensive backs have their eyes on the quarterback the whole way.
It does very much back up, I think, just general football theory, right? Coaches who play zone say we're going to make you earn every throw, and there'll be some easy ones in there, but eventually, there will be some easy throws in there, but eventually you'll make a mistake, you'll turn it over. We have our eyes on you. Versus man, we're going to challenge every single throw. We might give up some bigger plays, but every throw is going to be challenged. It's going to be difficult and hopefully, make life difficult for the quarterback and the receiver. So I think the numbers do back it up.
The interesting number to come there for me is that the average time to throw is significantly faster against man than it is zone, but teams get a higher percentage of pressure against man, typically because I think that's paired with the blitz. I would like to actually see that number with blitzes stripped out. So it was just regular pass rush personnel, how much they got pressure given that the ball is coming out quicker against man coverage. But that's just an aside.
We'll have to strip out the blitz. Also, because fire zone's terrible, it never works. So you're sending 5 guys and essentially nobody knows how to match up.
It works.
It never works. I'm convinced it never works. Those are the busts that we see every single week. Was it fire zone? Of course it was fire zone.
Yes.
Busted fire zone. So yeah, another good question. I'm enjoying the way the listeners are bringing the pod this week. Some deep dive types of questions, and certainly happy to dive into the database to answer what we can. Another question. Hi, Sam and Steve. It actually says Steve and Sam, so I was first.
It does.
I'm another Eagles fan. Another nice Eagles fan and a PFF Elite subscriber. We always love our Elite subscribers. You're our first-class listeners is what we call you guys. Enjoy listening to your podcast. I was ready to give up on Nelson Agholor after seeing 2 seasons of FredX level play. FredX? There we go.
FredX. Freddie Mitchell.
Yeah. Big mouth on Freddie. Big mouth on him. However, seeing Nelson thrive in the slot this year has given many Philly fans hope for a bright future with the Eagles. I never got the chance to watch Nelson play during college, so I had a couple questions that you may be able to answer. Did Nelson play most of his snaps in the slot at USC, or was he mostly outside? Number 2, do you have his college stats on production in the slot versus outside? If so, how do they compare? And number 3, if he was mostly a slot receiver in college, what made the Eagles believe he would be better suited to be playing out wide as he did in his first 2 seasons? Thanks for reading/answering my question. Keep up the wonderful work you do at PFF. And what's he say? Vedas Doshi. That's his name?
Apparently.
I actually thought, so at first I thought that was just like a sign-off. Oh, man.
Either way, good work at just rolling in and pronouncing it.
I just screwed up another listener, though.
Or maybe you nailed it.
Maybe I did.
That could be right.
Vadas, I'm sorry.
I have no idea how you pronounce it.
One of them's going to be right. You got the answers here, Sam?
Only one of those words has a capital letter, so maybe that is signing off. Either way, you've nailed the pronunciation, I'm sure.
Somebody's laughing at me like, dude, that's like a common phrase or sign-off that people know. Or they're like, you're an idiot. That's a dude's name, and you screwed it up.
Yeah, so 2014 was the first year that we started doing college football and the last year of Nelson Agholor at USC. And he played roughly the same number of snaps in the slot as he did out wide. So it was 43.8% in the slot, 48.9% out wide, a handful of snaps, 37 of them in the backfield in some capacity or other. So he was all over that offense. The big difference, though, is that being in the slot at USC back then, it was an absolute ton of deep passes. You know, those guys had this incredible vertical slot game where he was running deep down the field against these soft Pac-12 coverages. So I think that's why they looked at him and thought, this is a guy that could play outside, be a deep threat for us, be a perimeter weapon. But what they've discovered, or what they learned over the last couple of years, is that he just doesn't hold up physically on the outside. He's bullied by press coverage. He just cannot thrive out there. And if you look at the numbers, 19% of his snaps in 2015 were in the slot, 22% in 2016, but this year it's been 86.5%. So they've basically moved him completely to the slot. He's been a slot receiver this year, having been a perimeter receiver in the first 2 years, and it's completely transformed his production. We're now seeing that he does have quickness. He's got wiggle after he gets the ball in his hands. We're seeing some of these, end around and backfield carries as well, where you start to see that actually when this guy does have the ball, he can make some real things happen. It just turns out that he's not physically capable of dealing with that on the outside. He's too easily bullied by bigger defensive backs.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer, Sam. And here's the other way I would look at it too. We've talked about players coming out where the scouting report is he's a left tackle in college, but he could never do that at the NFL level. He must move to right tackle or he must move to guard. And our answer to that is, first off, tackles in general are so valuable. Why not let a guy fail first to just see? I think there is this element of, not that an outside receiver is that much more valuable than a slot receiver, but if you can find a true number 2 outside receiver, there's a ton of value there where maybe a few more guys can have success in the slot. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to at least give a guy a chance to fail. Now, did it take 2 whole seasons? Yes. And maybe that's a little bit too much, but when you look at the overall picture, you give him a chance on the outside. You always know you've got that fallback in the slot. Hey, look, he's excelled in the slot. That fits his skill set better, and you can get a valuable player out of him. So big picture, I don't hate the fact that, hey, they suffered through 2 years trying to fit him in on the outside and almost maybe justify that first round status, right? I mean, you don't always take slot receivers in the first round, even though in today's NFL they're basically starters. So overall, I think it ends up working out despite those 2 poor seasons.
Yeah, I think he's getting close at this point to fully justifying that. I was really high on him coming out. I thought he was such a talented playmaker at USC, and it was really disappointing to see how badly he struggled outside. But I think they've found his role in the NFL now, and we'll see how much better he can get.
All right, we've got, is it one more here, Sam, we're going to combine here?
Well, we're going to do that, but we also need to tackle the question from our own Mike Manfred, who came up with one of the best questions we've ever been asked and came up with it immediately after the injury to Carson Wentz. We need a pour one out soundtrack as well, not just the Madden shrill whistle and soundtrack that we've got. We need a Dr. Evil had a pour one out for my homies line, didn't he? Can we get that for poor old Carson? Anyway, Mike Manfred asked, after Carson Wentz down, with Wentz down, who gets the surplus ginger talent for the remainder of the season?
Oh, right. The ginger theory.
The ginger theory.
The
for
ginger
that
theory is thrown
before,
on its head because Wentz was stealing all of it, and Andy Dalton had nothing left, and Carson Palmer was on the shelf. Does it go to Sam Darnold for the bowl game?
This is the thing. So for anyone that wasn't listening before, we're going to throw this up on the podcast Twitter account as well to remind people. But there was a fan theory that there is a finite amount of ginger quarterback talent in the NFL at any one time. And the ginger quarterbacks basically draw from the same pool every single year, which is why you only get one of them playing well. Right now, Carson Wentz is playing out of his skin, which means Andy Dalton is having a down year. Carson Palmer was having a down year before he went down. And, vice versa. When Andy Dalton was good, other guys weren't good. So now it's opened up. Carson Wentz is down injured. So there is a surplus of ginger talent in the pool available to be used. So who gets it? I think we're going to see Sam Darnold go for like 6 touchdowns, 700 yards in the bowl game.
He has to. Or does Andy Dalton go off the last?
Andy Dalton for the last 3 weeks becomes like Joe Montana.
Or Carson Palmer heals miraculously, right? Instead of being out for the season, he just somehow finds a way to play.
Yeah, it's like a physical miracle. He ends up patching himself back up, walking back in, and leading the Cardinals to wins.
Okay, so that's what we're thinking. That's what we're looking at here. Sam Darnold just picks up all of the ginger talent and rides it to like the number 1 overall pick on the back of the greatest bowl game ever seen,
Yeah.
or Andy Dalton finishes strong now that the Bengals are essentially out of the playoff picture.
No, that's what I think it is. I think we're going to get this Darnold thing. It's going to be the reason he goes number 1 overall is because he was able to draw on Carson Wentz's leftover ginger talent.
We'll know this weekend if Andy Dalton struggles. Actually, he has 2 weekends to struggle, leaving all the more talent on the table for Darnold in the bowl game. So if you guys want to predict Darnold's bowl game performance, watch closely to how Andy Dalton performs this weekend and the ginger theory at work per the PFF podcast. I love it.
Great question. Great fan theory. We'll make sure that gets retweeted out so we can see.
All right, let's get to the last one, Sam. We had 2 questions essentially, throwing in some late game lateral theories. This has come up a couple times on the podcast. We're going to kind of combine the 2. I'll let you take it away and break down essentially what was asked or what was theorized.
Yes, we had a question from Jordan from Seattle and one from Mike, who is from New Jersey. And they were basically asking the same thing, coincidentally, in slightly different ways of doing it. But it was basically, why don't teams get more creative with that desperation last play when the game's on the line, you've got 4 seconds to score, and at the moment the game plan appears to be just throw laterals until somebody screws it up and you get tackled and or fumble the ball back for them to score another time. One of these guys actually drew up a whole play and wanted them to rehearse it complete with specific players on the roster. You know, he was an Eagles fan, so he's got Jason Kelsey, he's got Trey Burton, Nelson Agholor. He's got all kinds of people involved in this play. The other guy was talking about basically putting out the punt return team, including the long snapper, to get guys that are kind of used to that sort of play anyway out there on the field. But the general gist is, why are teams so unprepared for this situation that realistically seems to come up weekly for some team in the NFL? So what is your take on that, Steve? Why are teams so utterly useless at this?
It takes a lot of practice time to execute what these guys are saying, right? And
yeah,
it is one of those things that you're right. It does come up every week, but also if you're just better at your other plays, maybe it doesn't have to happen as often for you. So I think teams are looking at it like that, right? If I'm going to spend my time practicing, let me practice the stuff that's going to not put me in that situation at the end of the season, at the end of the game. On the other hand, I'm all for the creativity. I'm with you. Like, why we have this play that fails 99.9% of the time, unless you have Tyreek Hill. That's your one creative play. Give it to him and let him juke the entire team. So I'm all for somebody looking for a little bit more creativity and getting more skill guys out there.
Well, that's why I think the guy that had the full play with specific offensive personnel is a non-runner. I just don't see any team dedicating like full-time starters to this gig. I think the guy that wants to put out the punt return team is actually far better placed to get this done. Yeah. Because let's face it, the guys doing special teams are not doing that much during the week. They're practicing special team stuff. And there's only so much of that you can do with, let's cover another kick this time. I think that those guys would be well served in actually practicing this end of game desperation play, where you come up with something specific and the punt return team or the special teams unit can legitimately spend some time drilling this and getting it to work and executing properly. We had one more question that kind of relates to this that I think makes some sense. Is we had somebody that wants to expand the rosters to 60, the active rosters to 60. Because of all the injuries you get in the NFL, larger rosters lead to more prepared backups, to not having to sign guys off the street and then throw them into the game the next Sunday. This was from Jacques, by the way.
I think that's just Jacques. Jacques.
That's what I said.
No, you said Jacques.
I said Jacques.
It sounds too much like Jack.
Jacques. Right, whatever. I think that makes sense. I think you expand the roster a little bit and you give these guys a bit more leeway to get the bottom of the roster guys practicing stuff like this. So you expand that roster to 60. Now you've got a ready-made group, basically the scout team guys.
Give me my end of play team.
You've got the scout team players that can effectively run something specifically drilled to take advantage of that situation, and are almost certainly, just because they're drilled and executing it, going to do a better job of it than the guys that may be superior athletes and playmakers, but have no idea how to just throw laterals endlessly and hope it works out.
Look, I'm all for expanded rosters for many reasons. I mean, I don't think a team should ever have to strategize and say, do I dress 7 offensive linemen, and even run the risk of what happened a couple years ago where Tua from the Falcons had to play right tackle because the Falcons ran out of offensive linemen. So there's many reasons why you expand the rosters. Chalk this one up as just another reason, and I'm all for end of the game creativity. Find a new way, find new players to run these end of game plays. Maybe one gets a little bit closer. Maybe one works finally.
Yeah, I think there's ways of going about it that don't need to include the. I think that long snapper idea is a big one. Like instead of having a normal shotgun snap and then hoping the quarterback can buy a bit of time, let's actually fire a long snap back, buy the guy an extra 5 yards of space to work with to begin with, and then let's see what we can do back here.
Why would you even have the quarterback on the field for this thing?
Well, somebody's got to throw the ball at some point.
Why, maybe have all. So this is where you'd have Joe Webb. Like Joe Webb would be like the perfect player for this.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to be your starting quarterback, but you're going to have a guy that can throw the ball.
How far do you want to throw the ball to start this thing?
Well, far enough that I don't want the punter doing it.
Yeah, we have to look further into what this play looks like. But I'm all for having better players on there. That's a good start. Is that our last question for the week?
Yeah, that's it.
Hey, you guys did a good job. We had some MS Paint.
We did have a lot of MS Paint.
A lot of MS Paint. We had some good Twitter questions. We had some deep dive database questions. And, of course, we had Lee sending us the care package. I think it was a good week. We're having a ton of fun with the Mailbag edition, so please continue to hit us up with good questions and some more MS Paint. And if you guys want to send a care package, we accept those as well. So that's over podcasts@profootballfocus.com. Not going to send the address to the office, but if you guys really want to send a care package, just let us know. We can get you that. We do accept that. We accept furniture for the podcast Nook as well, and we accept any offers from companies looking to sponsor the PFF Awards. So all that stuff is on the table, Sam. We're going to be back, I think, with Mike Renner. I think Mike's back from his secret assignment, and should be the 3-man crew for the Week 15 preview. Getting towards crunch time here. Week 15 preview. That'll be the last podcast of the week. If you haven't subscribed, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and stick with us for the rest of the season. All right, Sam, that'll do it. We'll talk to you guys next time.